Who can turn the world on with her smile? Hello and welcome to the next episode of Matt and Todd Go to the Movies, the podcast where Matt and Todd go see a movie at our local Regal Cinema, and now we're going to talk about it in the parking lot, in the rain, in Matt's Time to Pilot, and we're going to talk about such things as, should you see this movie, should you not see this movie, should you wait for streaming, should you go in with maybe some snacks? Should you be snackless? Because maybe it's a snackless movie. And overall, our feelings towards this movie that was put forth to us. I am Todd Domer.
And I'm Matt Malloy. And yes, we are going to dive into how we feel, our gut reaction of the movie we watched this afternoon, which is called Smile.
Smile.
It is not a happy film. Despite its happy name, but it is something that we watched, and we will give our thoughts. So I'll get it out of the way to start with. There's no one famous in this movie. It's all unknowns.
Yeah. Okay. There's two, and I would say you're right as far as like celebrity status isn't there.
Okay.
But I do know two people in this movie.
Okay.
One is Kal Penn from the Harold and Kumar movies and all the other stuff he's done. I think he was on House. And,
oh, okay. Right.
and then the other one...
He's the supervising doctor, right?
Correct,
okay.
Yes. And then the other one is the fiance. And I don't know from anything else besides he's A-Train on The Boys. So...
okay.
I think... But your statement is definitely true. Celebrity status is not here in this movie.
Right. So, what is this movie about? Well... main character is her name is Ruth, right?
Rose.
Where'd I come up with Ruth?
I was almost about to say Doctor Lady, and then I was like, it just popped in my head that her name is Rose.
Yes. All right. So we've got Rose. Rose is engaged to Trevor. And
A-Train from The Boys.
and used to go out with Joel.
The cop.
Yes.
Just paint the picture, everyone.
Right. That's what we do here. We paint the picture without spoilers. All right. So Rose is works in an emergency psych ward type place. So, we're led to believe she works a lot. She's there. She has working 80-hour weeks and stuff like that, and have to deal with people who need psychiatric help. So it is in this context that she comes into contact with a woman who ends up killing herself right in front of Rose in a very graphic and gruesome way. And so that takes us down the road of then something happens to her, and in her mind or in reality, the movie kind of plays it both ways. Something goes wrong, horribly wrong, and basically she starts seeing things, and she's trying to get to the bottom of what happens. She thinks it's related to this woman who killed herself in front of Rose, and so her things just start unraveling in her life, basically, because people don't really believe what she comes to believe, that there's like an evil entity that is eventually going to make her kill herself, and she goes to her ex-partner, Joel, the cop, and finds out some more information that maybe this has happened before, and maybe there's there's a pattern, and so she's trying to figure out how to break the pattern, and how to not fall into this same trap that others have before. All the while believing there is an evil presence that is advancing on her life. So you've kind of got two things going on. You've got her trying to figure out what's going on and maybe like crack the case of these kind of terrible, gruesome suicides. And then you've also got everyone else in her life, for the most part, not believing her, and she's facing escalating consequences as someone with mental illness would face.
And that runs in her family. Like the beginning of the movie, you find out that her mom, committed suicide.
Right. Yeah, that's true. So anyway, it all leads up to this big climax moment where you learn whether or not she can kind of escape this, and or whether this train will continue. So that's as far as I'll take it without spoilers. And Todd, now's the point in the podcast where I ask you, what is your gut reaction to Smile?
I will receive your question.
Yes.
And proceed to answer it.
Okay.
So this movie is the next kind of like excerpt in kind of not a super long line, but just of movies that involve like something supernatural that can be passed on to other people. Like I think we've seen a little bit of a rise in movies like this. Like I can't remember the name of it, but there was another horror movie that made a splash a couple years ago about like almost the same premise, except for it wasn't smiling people. It just was people who weren't there following you, but you could pass it on to someone else, stuff like that. How do I feel about this movie? Well, I am not the biggest horror fan, as we know. Mm-hmm. So, and I'll give this movie credit that this movie made me squeamish a lot. Not like everything was so gory that I couldn't handle it, but it did build the suspense pretty well. But then at times I thought they were building suspense pretty cheaply. Like, it was like, it would build the time that you know something's going to jump out at you. Mm-hmm. And opposed to like something like Barbarian, where it would build the idea that there's a jump scare coming and then it wouldn't happen. Mm-hmm. This one kind of, as soon as they started to build the possibility of a jump scare, boom, it was there. Like, they delivered on every time that I felt like it was coming down the pipe. Mm-hmm. And that kind of made it a little bit predictable to me. Mm-hmm. That you could really feel where this stuff was coming. Instead of it just happening, it was always a build-up to something. Every once in a while, you get one that had no build-up. But I feel like majority of them were, music set the tone, cinematography set the tone. You knew something was coming. So if I was a true horror fan, I feel like that would be a negative to me. Just because I think the whole great thing about jump scares is, and maybe you could attest to this more as a person who's a fan of horror, is that not knowing they're coming is the best. And so this movie kind of really set up this idea that you could almost predict the jump scares coming. Again, a couple of them you couldn't, but I feel like majority of them you could really feel what was coming. But that's just me. So outside of that, I had some problems with this movie, only because approaching it in a practical sense, which is what I do for every movie, I think. Mm-hmm. So I think my biggest issue in this movie is how not smart the main character is, considering she's a psychiatrist. And she, how can I explain this without doing spoilers? I think she makes a ton of wrong decisions in this movie. And there's times where, she acknowledges that she's, exuding these behaviors that a typical person would, who's having, a mental breakdown, but then she fights everyone who tries to help her and stuff like that, and is like, you can't help me, which I guess I get in a sense, but also, if you kind of are feeling like this thing's happened to you, why wouldn't it be like the more the merrier? You know, as far as like trying to help or like, you know, trying to do something. And then once the main character is like convinced and like has some idea that something supernatural is happening, at no point, and this is what, and not even because I'm a Christian, but at no point does she go to like a church or anything, which I'm like, okay, if something's kind of proven in your mind or whatever that something supernatural's happened, like at no point does she seek a supernatural cure to this thing that is supernaturally that she's convinced is happening to her. And that doesn't click in my mind. Like, and then like once the kind of like, I guess, rules are established of like, I guess the so-called rules of whatever's going on, it's all bad decisions from there, in my opinion. And I guess my other biggest problem with this movie is that they tried too hard to connect it back to her mother, like, which was completely separate case, had nothing to do with like what's currently happening to her. Like, it just was like, I felt a disconnect there. Like, and I don't know, maybe you didn't, but I was also like, they just tried too hard to connect it back to her mother, who had nothing to do with this true or untrue supernatural force that's happening to her. So, I mean, I don't think this movie's bad. I think if you're a fan of horror, then you should, you know, this is probably up your alley. If you're not a fan of horror, then I would steer clear of this, because there were times, as I was informing Matt, there was a time where I knew a jump scare was coming, and I could feel it and stuff like that, so I purposely closed my eyes, because I was like, well, I know this is coming, so why would I willingly experience it? That's just me. I understand people who like horror movies, they want that, I think. So, you know, obviously people who like these kind of movies, this is a fine installment, I think, in these type of movies. If you're a person like me who's kind of, I guess, analytical and stuff like that, there's plenty to pick apart, I think. But that doesn't mean it's bad. It just means, like, I guess it's just not on par with thinking about Barbarian specifically, and how just out of the norm and good that was, and stuff like that. This one did not meet it that horror level. And it's not, I can't compare it to like Halloween Ends or anything like that, because it's not a slasher. Like, it's like a more of a psychological with some stuff going on. So the only other thing that I want to touch on is the acting in this movie. And for the first like maybe 40 minutes, 30 to 40 minutes, I was like, the acting in this movie is atrocious. Like, it's kind of what I was thinking. But the back half of the movie, I felt like the main woman really brought it from there. First, I was like, oh, yeah, this is awkward because your acting's awkward. And then it was like, once everything starts rolling, I was like, man, she really brought it from this point on. But my opinion was already kind of soured because it just started not so great. So I think that's going to count as a negative, but it's like, I wanted to explain why it's like, I thought there was some good acting in this movie, but it took us a minute to get there. So I guess, like I said, if you're a fan of these kind of movies, you should see this movie. If you're not, then don't worry about it. I do think this movie had, and I don't know if we've ever touched on the podcast, had such a great marketing campaign, which was like the people at the baseball game smiling and stuff like that. It just was like pretty genius, I thought. So I want to give props there. Like, that marketing campaign made me want to see this movie more. So I think it really did what it accomplished, and that's phenomenal to me. So yeah, I mean, this is one of those movies where if you're gonna see it, you're gonna see it. If it's not on your radar at all, you're really not gonna go out of your way to see it. But if you're a fan of horror, I would say probably, well, why wouldn't you see it at this point? So, although I don't know how much longer it's gonna be in theaters, we're a little late to the game on this one. So, anywho, that's me. Matt, what did you feel about our next horror installment? To which my girlfriend was like, "Why do you guys keep seeing so many horror movies?" My response was, "Well, it's the season. Like, it just there's so many more horror movies coming out right now."
Right. Yeah, we aren't seeing them all either.
Yeah, and also my backup statement to that is always like, I'm like, "Well, Matt likes horror."
This is true. I do. All right. So thoughts on this? I thought there's some interesting things here, and there is some not great things.
Yeah.
But I will say that the one jump scare where you close your eyes, I did not perceive it coming, and so it really got me.
Yeah.
And I was like, "Oh man, that was good. That was enjoyable."
Yeah.
So
I'll have to ask you what specifically happened because I know it happened, but I didn't see it. So,
yeah, I'll tell you that offline.
all right.
So I thought this is kind of a decent horror movie, and I think like you're dealing with like this dark menacing force that's unknown. And I felt like the build up for learning about that and learning what kind of the rules of the game are here and all of that. I thought that the plot and the story was well constructed as we marched down the road towards the climax of the movie when we were sort of explaining things, the build up, if you will. Mm-hmm. And I thought it was also, there was some interesting commentary here on mental illness
in general. Yeah.
Yeah, like there, I think there are two kinds of people in life. I don't want to be super binary about it, but I think there's people who shade more towards talking about like crazy people and saying like that person is nuts and whatever, and then you have maybe more compassionate people in this sense who will talk about mental illness and people need help and like there's reasons why people have bad behavior in their life and maybe they need some kind of mental health support, and there are those two views are highlighted in this movie quite often,
right? And always almost at the same time. Like someone would come in and be like, "Oh, well, the crazies are crazies," and then someone would be like, "They're going through a movement. Have some compassion." Or whatever.
Right, exactly. So I think that's good for people in our society to see. Like, not only are there certain views that we shouldn't hold, like we shouldn't be calling people crazy, especially as an insult or when they're really dealing with something, to like just label them that way. But also, I think in speaking up and speaking out, when you hear something like that, it's always good to kind of see an example of, okay, maybe they didn't say it directly, but like, let's not use those words anymore because those are kind of loaded words at this point and not helpful to label people. So that I thought that was an interesting part of where we went in this, mostly what is a horror movie and a thriller.
Sure.
I thought that also they did a really good job of building suspense. And I was on edge throughout the movie. And I think I was on more edge because this woman's life was falling apart too.
Yes.
Like that played into it and made her a very sympathetic character because it was like you could see her struggling with whatever this was, whether and I think you could even make the case that there was no evil entity. You could make that case. You could say, well, this was in her head. But I lost my train of thought. Shoot. Well, anyway, I thought they did a good job of building the suspense, and it was hard to watch her life unravel when you knew that with the right support and the right help, or just some better luck, like maybe things could turn out differently.
Well, it also gave you this idea that, like, no matter how things turn out with this, is there or isn't there evil identity, her life's pretty screwed at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's, like, an extra sense of, like, wow, you really feel for this character because, like, there is no coming out the other side of this thing clean or unscathed or anything like that. Like, everything has suffered because of this.
Yes. And there are several times to good effect, I think, that they take you in this movie into a dream, but it's like it explores a type of resolution of the movie that might make things turn out differently than they actually turn out. And then the main character wakes up and it was a dream.
Yeah.
That happens several times, and I think it's well done. Especially when they're like when it's a road that may be somewhat better than all the other choices,
right?
And then she wakes up and it's not good.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna say that I did enjoy this film. I found it a little stressful, to be honest, just sitting there watching it.
Yes.
But I think that was the goal of the movie, and I have to give them credit for making me feel like that. Like, movies make us feel things, and that's why we like them.
Sure.
And this one made me feel something. I didn't necessarily like the way I felt.
Sure.
But I do respect that the movie made me feel something, and so for that I'm going to give it some credit. And I'm going to give it some credit for being a pretty good horror film. Is it like a good movie in general? Like, I would say Barbarian is a good horror film, but it's also kind of a good movie.
Yeah.
This one I would say is a good horror film, but not that great of a movie.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. Some of the cinematography, I thought they were trying too hard in some areas. A lot of like camera turning,
right,
and like just going upside down and stuff like that. And I
for
just
no
was
reason.
Like, oh my gosh! Like, the only thing I could try to go for is like after she meets the young woman, kind of in the beginning, her life is turned upside down. So I'm like, is that what you're going for? Because if that's what you're going for, not only is it dumb, it's giving me a headache. Like,
right.
So,
there's no reason for the upside down shots.
And honestly, at this point in my life, for some reason, it makes me nauseous when it happens. Especially, like, just the shot of upside down stuff makes me nauseous. But specifically where it starts right side up and then it all just kind of turns slowly. I'm like, oh my gosh. So,
yeah. Okay. Well, that's where I'll leave it for me.
Fair enough. Well, now we get down to the brass tacks here.
Brass tacks.
What? Yes. And when you hear my rating, listeners, not Matt, you're gonna think you know what it refers to, but I can guarantee you're wrong. How many mustaches would you give this movie? 5 being the best, and I'm not going to go into why it's the best, and 0 being the worst, and I'm not going to go into that at all.
Yes, there are several mustaches in this movie, but I know which one you're referring to.
Yes.
All right, I'm gonna go with a 3.2 overall. Part of that is my love of horror, and part of that is the fact that you made me feel uncomfortable at different parts movie. So good job, smile people with that. But there are problems. There are significant problems. But I think I come in above average and on the horror front, and that's enough to bump it, over a 3 for me.
Sure.
Not the greatest, but a decent horror option. So
yeah,
3.2 mustaches out of 5.
Fair. So for me, my rating's going to be a little interesting. As a person who does suffer from mental illness and has experienced a ton of what's in this movie, I appreciated that every time someone was like downplaying mental illness, they had the opposite of someone like. So I appreciated that part, but watching this woman go through stuff that at times would make her contemplate suicide was hard for me. But it's not like it took me out of the movie, and it's not like I'm so triggered or mad at this movie or anything like that. It just was an interesting like note in my mind that I'm watching this. And I think this is not just for this specific movie. This happens for any movie that deals with like any kind of mental illness or any type of potential suicide or anything like that. So I'm going to land on a 2.75.
Okay.
And I do think this is an above average horror movie. I think it's a little bit of a below average movie per se, but I do think the good outweighs the bad, and I appreciated how they handled mental illness. But at the same time, I'm like, what a weird concept of you want a movie that is serious about mental illness, and then it's like, oh, here's the supernatural thing, maybe. Like, it's just like,
right.
That's like almost not conflicting ideas, but it was interesting. So, also my prediction, you heard it here first. Smile is going to be the new Final Destination. Because they are similar in a lot of ways that I will happily discuss with anyone, but I'm not going to discuss it here because I would have to go into spoilers.
So you think this is launching a franchise of Smile movies?
I do actually, yes.
Okay.
So,
yeah.
I mean, the smart thing would have it be a one-off, but we don't live in a world where one-offs happen a whole lot. So
right. No, that's true.
So anyway, I gave it 2.75. So
yes. Okay. Well, I guess that will wrap it up for this episode of Matt and Todd Go to the Movies, where we reviewed and watched the movie Smile. And we gave it an average rating of 2.975 mustaches out of 5, which is slightly above average.
But we acknowledge there's flaws. I don't know that you... if you wanted to see this, I would support you seeing it in the theater, because I think the audio, they do a lot with audio in this.
Yeah,
neither of us really touched on the audio side of things, which I do think heavily played into the squirmishness of not being able to sit still in your seat and stuff like that. So I think they did a good job in that department.
Yeah, agree.
But yeah.
So I would say if you want to see this one, try and catch it in theaters if you can, or go to a friend's house who has a really good sound system.
Yeah, I was going to say the audio is not going to transfer for a regular movie sitting. But if you got someone who's got like surround sound and stuff like that, that'll be pretty nice.
Yeah, true. So that's that. See it if you want to. Keep listening to our podcast if you want to.
To peek behind the curtain real quick.
Yes.
This is I think the first ever time we are going to see 2 movies in one day. Not going to say, wait.
No, it's not. We went to the drive-in.
Oh, okay. That's fair.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is the first time in a theater.
Yes.
That we have watched a movie. We are going to go potentially get something to eat. Then we're going to come back and watch another movie. Not going to say what that next movie is.
Right.
But get excited, I guess.
Get excited.
Or not. It's up to you. I'm not trying to tell you how to live.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for listening and subscribing. And feel free to, if you ever want to appear on our podcast, we welcome everyone to appear. So
you just have to come see a movie with us.
You just have to do that, and and have some.
We've
thoughts.
done our first 5-person podcast, but there's still room in Matt's on the pilot for more.
We've got third row seating here.
So,
we could really fill it up. So yes, thank you everyone, and we will see you next time.
Da 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 da
Da da
da da da.
da da da.